Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. Respected brothers and sisters, Assalamu alaikum. Tonight marks the eve of the 21st of the holy month of Ramadan. Inshallah, we will commemorate the final Majlis of the Martyrdom of Amir al-Mu'mineen Imam Ali ibn Abi Talib alayhi salam. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ali. Our program tonight will inshallah comprise of the recitation of the Noble Quran by Brother Aun Jawa, and then we will have recitation of Salam by Brother Jafar Sayyid and Abbas Zaidi. And of course, tonight's majlis will be recited by Hujjat al-Islam, Shaykh Reza Hemyari. We will now begin our majlis. I would like to request Brother Aun Jawa to please come forward for his recitation of the Noble Quran. Let us welcome him with a loud salawat.
Tonight I'll be reciting Surah Fajr. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم والفجر وليال عشر والشفع والوتر والليل إذا يسر هل في ذلك قسم لذي حجر ألم تر كيف فعل ربك بعاد إرم ذات العماد التي لم يخلق مثلها في البلاد وثمود الذين جابوا الصخر بالواد وفرعون ذي الأوتاد الذين طغوا في البلاد فأكثروا فيها الفساد فصب عليهم ربك سوط عذاب إن ربك لبالمرصاد وأما الإنسان إذا ما ابتلاه ربه فأكرمه ونعمه فيقول ربي أكرمن وأما إذا ما ابتلاه فقدر عليه رزقه فيقول ربي أهانن كلا بل لا تكرمون اليتيم ولا تحاضون على طعام المسكين وتأكلون التراث أكلا لما وتحبون المال حبا جما كلا إذا دكت الأرض دكا دكا وجاء ربك والملك صفا صفا وجيء يومئذ بجهنم يومئذ يتذكر الإنسان وأنى له الذكرى يقول يا ليتني قدمت لحياتي فيومئذ لا يعذب عذابه أحد ولا يوثق وثاقه أحد يا أيتها النفس المطمئنة ارجعي إلى ربك راضية مرضية فادخلي في عبادي وادخلي جنتي صدق الله العلي العظيم وصل على محمد وآل محمد. By the dawn, and by the 10 nights, and by the even number and the odd, and by the night when it passes, is there not in all that an oath sufficient for one of perception? Have you not considered how your Lord dealt with Ad, with Aram, who had lofty pillars, the likes of whom had never been created in the land, and with Thamud, who carved the rocks in the valley, and with Pharaoh, owner of the stakes, all of whom oppressed within the lands and increased therein the corruption. So your Lord poured upon them a scourge of punishment. Indeed, your Lord is in observation. And as for man, when his Lord tries him and thus is generous to him and favors him, he says, "My Lord has honored me." But when he tries him and restricts his provision, he says, "My Lord has humiliated me." No, but you do not honor the orphan, and you do not encourage one another to feed the poor, and you do not consume and you consume inheritance, devouring it altogether, and you love wealth with immense love. No, when the earth has been leveled, pounded, and crushed, and your Lord has come, and the angels rank upon rank, and brought within view, the day is hell. That day man will remember, but what good to him will be the remembrance. He will say, "Oh, I wish I had sent ahead some good for my life." So on that day none will punish as severely as his punishment, and none will bind as severely as his binding of the evildoers. To the righteous it will be said, O reassured soul, return to your Lord well pleased and pleasing to him, and enter among my righteous servants, and enter my paradise. By Muhammad wa ali Muhammad salawat.
MashaAllah, on. That was a wonderful recitation. For On's Sehat and Salamti and Khair Barakat, and for his parents, let us all recite a loud salawat. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. I would now like to request Brother Jafar Sayyid and Brother Abbas Zaidi to please come forward for the recitation of Salam and Marcia. Let's welcome them with a loud salawat.
Muhammad wa ali Muhammad salawat.
محمد وآل محمد.
Farewell, Haydar, farewell, O my father. Farewell, Haydar, I'm Zainab, your daughter. Life has no meaning without you, for you were my joy as I grew. Farewell, Haydar, farewell, O my father.
Farewell,
Haydar, farewell, O my father. Just yesterday I had witnessed you cry and mourn for my mother, and here today with sorrow I say that I shed tears for you, Father. If only I could take back time to the moment of that prayer, as you said, Allahu Akbar, whilst praying in the mosque of Kufa. I will place my head near your head, as Ibn Muljim yields out his sword, and close to the wound from where you bled, with my hands as you meet your Lord. How could they dare to strike your head, Ali? Have they no fear of Judgment Day, Ali? Your absence has broken my heart. I thought nothing takes us apart. Your absence has broken my heart. I thought nothing takes us apart. Farewell, Haidar. Farewell, O my father. Farewell, Haidar. Farewell, O my father. Farewell, Haidar. I'm Zainab, your daughter. Life has no meaning without you, for you were my joy as I grew. Farewell, Haidar. Farewell, O my father. The orphans ask from dawn till dusk, where has Haidar Ali gone? They all cry out with broken hearts, when will Haidar Ali come? And like them I cry out, Father, along with Hassan and Hussein. Who will extinguish our fire, our lives filled with so much pain? That pain of your wound and poison, and the absence of your embrace. They call me Zainab the orphan. Ya Ali, all of this I face. How could they kill God's best of creation? They waited until you went in prostration. With the sword that struck your head, I wish it were me instead. With the sword that struck your head, I wish it were me instead. Farewell, Haidar. Farewell, O my father. Farewell, Haidar. Farewell, O my father. Farewell, Haidar. I'm Zainab, your daughter. Life has no meaning without you, for you were my joy as I grew. Farewell, Haidar. Farewell, O my father. Salawat ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad.
MashaAllah, Jafar Bhai and Abbas Bhai, for their Sahat and Salamti and Khair Barakat, let us all recite aloud salawat. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. Brothers and sisters, as we turn our attention towards tonight's lecture, just a couple of brief announcements. If you wouldn't mind, please checking your cell phones at this time to making sure that they are on mute or at least on vibrate. Also, there have been arrangements for mothers with children, specifically for the English lecture hall. So we have accommodations. You can ask any of our volunteers if you would like to use that room. And with that, it is my privilege to kindly request Hujjatul Islam, Shaykh Reza Hemyari, to please come to the minbar at this time. Let us all stand and move forward as we welcome him with a loud salawat.
For your own marhumin and the rest of the community, please recite a Fatiha masbughatan bis salat ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم إياك نعبد وإياك نستعين اهدنا الصراط المستقيم صراط الذين أنعمت عليهم غير المغضوب عليهم ولا الضالين. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم وبه نستعين إنه خير ناصر ومعين ثم الصلاة والسلام والتحية والإكرام على سيدنا ونبينا أبي القاسم محمد وعلى أهل بيته الطيبين الطاهرين المعصومين سيما بقية الله في الأراضين وحجته على الخلق أجمعين واللعنة الدائمة على أعدائهم من الآن إلى يوم الدين. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم رب اشرح لي صدري ويسر لي أمري واحلل عقدة من لساني يفقه قولي. أما بعد فقد قال الله الحكيم في محكم كتابه الكريم أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم وإذ قال ربك للملائكة إني جاعل في الأرض خليفة قالوا أتجعل فيها من يفسد فيها ويسفك الدماء ونحن نسبح بحمدك ونقدس لك قال إني أعلم ما لا تعلمون صدق الله العلي العظيم. صلوا على محمد وعلى محمد. Second louder salawat. Dear elders, brothers and sisters in Iman, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. We have been discussing these verses of Surah Al-Baqarah, verse number 30 to 33, and inshallah today we'll continue the discussion with verse number 34. Past few nights, we've mentioned that some of the stories of the Quran, they have different messages that we can derive from them. One is an ethical message that, there are certain things that we must do. There is good that we must act on, and there is evil that we must refrain from. Certain legal verses, ethical and moral verses that Allah mentions. On another level, some of the stories of the Quran describe for us how we should orient ourselves towards Allah's creation. Where is our place in relation to Allah and as well the rest of the world? And then thirdly, many of the verses, according to the Ahlul Bayt, they refer not just to our place, but as well the relation of the Ahlul Bayt themselves to the rest of God's creation, that there is a hierarchy in God's creation. We humans, we have a great potential to be amongst the khulafa, the representatives of Allah for His creation, for His earth, and that status of being a representative, it is particular to people who have fulfilled the potential that Allah has placed in their souls. The greatest representatives that God has are the Ahlul Bayt. And so the verses that talk about Iman, they are referring ultimately to the Ahlul Bayt, and then they refer to us in terms of our relationship then to the Iman of the Ahlul Bayt. There's a hierarchy in God's creation, and we fall somewhere in that hierarchy, depending on our Iman and our belief and faith. Last night we mentioned that Allah, He has this dialogue with the angels. and he proves to the angels. They were questioning, why is it that this human being that's going to cause a lot of corruption is going to shed a lot of blood? And the angels knew this. The angels ask Allah, why do you create and give him this status? And then Allah responds. He says, I will teach this human some knowledge. I will give him some insights into the secrets of my creation that you don't have, you as angels, you as blessed beings in my creation, you don't have the capacity for. He said that the verse seems to focus on this attribute of knowledge. Mentioned a few examples last night. And those examples, they are supposed to convey this idea that sometimes in our day, we think of knowledge as data points, as specific facts about the world that we might know, or we might enter into a computer, and then the computer can store that information. We think of it as information. But knowledge, according to the Ahlul Bayt and according to the Quran, is supposed to transform a person's soul. It's supposed to make them into a different being. Again, that idea of orienting myself in relation to God. It's supposed to bring me closer to Allah. And this is where the other part, the other dimension of this verse comes in, which the verse seems to say that it's not just that Nabi Adam, alayhi salam, that distinguishing feature, that characteristic that took Nabi Adam and made him even greater than the angels of God. Angels, of course we know, they fulfill the decree of Allah. Whatever Allah tells them, they do immediately. They're the ones who bring the rain down, according to some verses, the rain that we hear, the thunder maybe. They bring the bounties and the blessings of Allah to the earth. And then there are angels of the hellfire. That Allah uses them to punish those who disbelieve. Both good and, or rather we should say, both blessings and punishment. Whatever Allah wants of them, they do. They are the means, the tools that Allah uses to run His creation. And so the angels are usually understood to not really have a separate will from the will of Allah. There are a few verses that Allah mentions, like this verse, where the angels seem to be expressing a will, asking a question from Allah, saying that we are separate and we are going to ask Allah a question about His creation. But ultimately, the angels are simply means for Allah to further His goal. These angels, who do nothing but worship Allah, وَنَحْنُ نُسَبِّحُ بِكَ وَنُقَدِّسُ لَكَ وَنَحْنُ نُسَبِّحُ بِحَمْدِكَ وَنُقَدِّسُ لَكَ. We worship and praise you, O Allah. We glorify you. That's all we do. And yet you are going to set a creature apart from us that's going to be distinguished and is going to potentially even be greater than us. Allah says, first, there is this potential for knowledge that humans have that you angels do not. I'm going to give them the secrets of my creation. And then secondly, the way that the human being responds, that ultimate human being. If we think about Nabi Adam as the fullest human being, as the human being who is the prototype, the greatest possible human, then this human has knowledge, he has insight, but also when Allah commands him to do something, then he does it without showing arrogance, without being conceited. When Allah says, قَالَ يَا آدَمْ أَنْبِئْهُمْ بِأَسْمَائِهِمْ. Nabi Adam he is commanded to tell the angels about the names, that knowledge that God had bestowed upon him. فَلَمَّا أَنْبَأَهُمْ بِأَسْمَائِهِمْ قَالَ أَلَمْ أَقُلْ لَكُمْ إِنِّي أَعْلَمُ غَيْبَ السَّمَاوَاتِ وَالْأَرْضِ. When Nabi Adam tells the angels, he gives them that knowledge, he teaches them, Allah responds and he tells the angels, did I not tell you that I have knowledge and I know the secrets of the heavens and the earth? وَأَعْلَمُ مَا تُبْدُونَ وَمَا كُنْتُمْ تَكْتُمُونَ. And I know that which you present and that which you hide. This is a key part of the verse. I know that which you present as though you are in full service to me. But then sometimes you might hide, that there is something in your heart that maybe you do not show. And then Allah continues, وَإِذْ قُلْنَا لِلْمَلَائِكَةِ. And when we told now the angels, أُسْجُدُوا لِآدَمَ. Now the angels are not just hearing about the position of Nabi Adam, but now they must respond as well. We're talking about the status of a Khalifa. What does it mean exactly for Allah to create a representative on His earth? We said the means by which He becomes a representative is through that knowledge, and for Nabi Adam to make his desire and his will align with the will of Allah. When Allah gives him a command, he responds fully without digressing from Allah's command. And then Allah says, this is what it means for Nabi Adam to be the Khalifa. That I tell even my angels, وَإِذْ قُلْنَا لِلْمَلَائِكَةِ اسْجُدُوا لِآدَمَ فَسَجَدُوا إِلَّا إِبْلِيسَ أَبَى وَاسْتَكْبَرَ وَكَانَ مِنَ الْكَافِرِينَ. Some of our mufassirin, when translating or explaining this verse says that Allah commanded the angels to now prostrate and bow down to Nabi Adam. And they all prostrated, except for Iblis, Shaitan. He refused and he showed arrogance. He became haughty. وَكَانَ مِنَ الْكَافِرِينَ. And he was amongst those who disbelieved. If you remember the previous verse, Allah says, I know وَأَعْلَمُ مَا تُبْدُونَ وَمَا كُنْتُمْ تَكْتُمُونَ. What is it that the angels were hiding? Some of the mufassirun say that it's possible that the angels were hiding this belief. That it's fine. You can create human beings as the successor, your successor, upon the rest of the earth. But maybe we are separated from that. Now Allah, in this verse, He tells them, that belief that you have, that belief as well is incorrect. That He is now my successor as well over the angels. Not just the heavens and the earth bow down to Nabi Adam, but even the angels themselves must bow down. And only those who are arrogant do not. Some other mufassirun, they say that person like Iblis, who was considered and was not distinguished from the angels, he is the one who hides. And he is the one who has that rot in his heart, that with this action it becomes apparent that now Iblis shows his arrogance. After all of those years, it said thousands of years of worship Iblis did before the creation of Nabi Adam. A person who on the surface was in full service of Allah. But then Allah shows His true nature. Whichever interpretation we take, the idea here is that Allah, He wants us as a part of His creation to align not just our knowledge, not just what we believe, but as well our intentions and our will in terms of His will, our wants, our desires in terms of His desires. Sallu ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad. And this is a crucial aspect of the Quran, and also a very important way that we understand ourselves as human beings. Our volition, our free will. What is it that distinguishes us human beings from Allah? We could have been like the rocks and the stones and the wood that don't have any consciousness, that just fulfill whatever God commands them to do, and they don't have any distinction between the rest of God's creation. One of the ways that Allah has distinguished human beings is that not only are they conscious of themselves, I know who I am, I have a name, and I come from a place that is different from, say, you or other creatures in this world. But as well, I have the ability to go against that which God has commanded me to do. This is a very sort of wondrous and very interesting aspect of human beings. Any other creature in this world, of course there are animals that have some level of volition, but not the same volition that human beings have. You take a rock, you throw it, or you let it go, and it falls to the ground. It doesn't have any way of digressing from your command or from what you have done to it. Even animals, they go based on their instinct. That's how they act, for the most part. But then human beings, they don't just act based on instinct. They don't just act based on their natural capacity, but sometimes they act based on something that might even go against their nature. It goes against the way that Allah had created them. And so we commit sin and we make mistakes. This is sometimes expressed in terms of our choices. Modern sociologists, just to bring it to today, they talk about one of the distinguishing features of our times as being our ability to choose. Back in the day, you wouldn't really think about your identity in terms of something that I have chosen as an individual. You would be born in a community, in a town, in a province, wherever that might have been, and that was given to you, that was fated, that was destined for you. You wouldn't decide what types of clothes you would wear. Everybody would wear the same types of clothes. There wasn't going to the mall, or we don't go to the mall anymore, of course. You don't buy things from Amazon or wherever else people buy their clothes from these days. Buy your shoes and so on and so forth. You had one tailor, or maybe even not a tailor, that would pass down clothes from one sibling to another, maybe from parents to children. And the styles were singular, the fashions weren't as plentiful. Everything that we thought about was already set in place for us. It was already determined. Think about 100, 150 years ago. The place that you were from, you probably wouldn't leave that town or that village, maybe sometimes even your entire life. You knew where you were from because there was no other option. Not to even talk about religion, culture, practices. And yet now we have almost an infinite amount of choice. Not just in the clothes that we wear. Sometimes we decide to wear traditional clothes. Sometimes we decide to wear other types of clothes. Not just even in the types of people we want to associate with, or the places that we decide to live. In this country, a lot of those decisions are made by jobs and sort of financial decisions. But it's ultimately a choice. Do I decide to live in this city because I can find a better job? Or do I decide to live in this city because this is where my family is and this is where I grew up? I'm familiar with all the people around me. It's a choice. I have the choice to make that decision. But even when it comes down to my identity or even my religion, my practices, we become very eclectic. Have you heard of this idea? Spiritual but not religious? SBNR is what they call it in religious studies. Spiritual but not religious. I pick and choose the different practices that gives me a sense of meaning, gives me a sense of spirituality. Maybe I like namaz, salat, because I'm facing a certain direction, gives me a sense of, heightened feeling of I don't know what. But I also like meditation, because that also gives me a heightened feeling or a sense of I don't know what, right? It gives me a connection to something bigger than myself. And then I like charity, but I don't like the zakat or the khums. I like this, but I don't like that. And so I pick and choose what I think is best or that resonates most with me. Spiritual, but not religious. I choose, but I don't want to be told. I don't want to have destiny choose for me. Maybe that was the case 30 years ago. Now, we increasingly see that the same thing that brought me choice, technology, my ability to move to different places, that same thing is now limiting my choice. These AI companies and all of these sort of data companies, they are now limiting our choice based on what they think we want or we need. Think about all of the different products that we buy. A lot of them are decided for us before we even make that decision. So we have this progress both of expanding choice, supposedly the one thing that makes us absolutely human, my free will, my ability to choose my life and what I want, becomes expansive, but then it also becomes limited. And it doesn't just become limited in terms of the number of choices, but also in terms of the quality of choice. It becomes the least common denominator, the things that satisfy my urges and my desires, my material desires. And this is one thing that the Quran mentions in various stories and descriptions of human beings. I want to just give a few examples about that, just idea of free will and how important it is in the way that we think about ourselves. Sallu ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad. For one, Sallu ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad. When we think of the Day of Judgment, what do we think about? We think about a time when, or a condition, a state in which Allah reveals to us our very nature, the most intimate parts of who we are and what makes us human beings. When you look in the descriptions of the Quran, when it talks about the Day of Judgment, one of the key features of what the Day of Judgment and the hereafter looks like is in terms of how much human beings can express their free will, how much they can choose. So if you look in the way that Allah describes both the people of paradise as well as the people of hellfire, this is one of the key features. The people of paradise, they get to choose an infinite number of things. Whatever they want, whatever irada they have, whatever desire they have, Allah gives them and fulfills that desire in whatever means they want, whatever form that might be. I'll just mention a few examples here. Allah says, for example, in Surah Yasin, in the beginning of Surah Yasin, Allah says, "Inna ja'alna fi a'naqihim aghlala." This is referring to the enemies of Allah, those who are going to be punished. We are going to set upon their throats, upon their necks, chains, going to bind them. فَهِيَ إِلَى الْأَذْقَانِ فَهُمْ مُقْمَحُونَ. And they're not going to be able to move their necks because the chains and the collars that we set for them, it's going to bind them so that they can't even lift their necks, have no mobility. If I want to choose to bring my head down, I can't. If I want to choose to move my head from left to right, I won't be able to. Their hands are bound, their necks are collared. وَجَعَلْنَا مِنْ بَيْنَ أَيْدِيهِمْ سَدًّا. And they're not going to be able to move forward. وَمِنْ خَلْفِهِمْ سَدًّا. And they can't move backward. فَأَغْشَيْنَاهُمْ فَهُمْ لَا يُبْصِرُونَ. And their eyes are going to be covered, and they won't have the ability to see. So think about what choice a person who is going to be punished is going to have. Limiting that person's free will. Doesn't have the choice even to make his own movements. He's going to be led, in other words. Like a camel is led, a camel that is collared. Like a slave is led, which wherever the master pulls him, that's where he goes. In other verses of the Quran, it mentions that the only thing that a kafir on the day of judgment, again, think about, this is the reality of who we become and who we are. That is what the day of judgment is going to look like. When Allah pulls away all the veils. The only thing that a person can choose to do is either accept his fate or on his tongue reject and lie. Some verses say that these people are going to say that, "Oh Allah, if you bring us back to this earth, then we would change our behavior. We would do something different." They think that they have the choice to go back, but Allah refuses them that choice. Let's compare this with the Ahl Iman and the Ahl Yameen. In these beautiful verses of Surah Al-Insan, Allah describes what the people who are going to be blessed, how they are going to be treated. Sallu ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad. Allah says that they are going to be sitting on these thrones and they are going to be served by all of these different servants, and Allah is going to present them with whatever they want. Cups that are being passed around, servants that bring them brocades and beautiful clothing, bring them food, whichever they want. It's going to cover over them any sort of harm. The sun, despite its being bright and blazing, they are going to be covered. Whatever they want, Allah is going to provide for them. Whatever they need, Allah will give them without even them asking for it. Their fullest desires, their fullest will is going to be given to them. Rivers of honey and rivers of the greatest things that God can give to a human being, these are provided for them. You can read the verses on your own. Allah says, وَيُطَافُ عَلَيْهِمْ بِآنِيَةٍ مِّن فِضَّةٍ وَأَكْوَابٍ كَانَتْ قَوَارِيرًا. These chalices are being passed around. They're being served whatever they want. And then the verses continue. What's special about Surah Al-Insan is that Allah focuses on those He is going to bless. I won't read it because for the sake of time, but you can read this at home. Then, what's also special about Surah Al-Insan is that Allah says the desire and the will of these people, that is also based on a hierarchy. There are certain moments when we said human beings, they have a certain potential, and different people in Allah's creation, they fulfill that potential based on their will. That's taqwa, that consciousness they have of Allah. There are certain people who, when Allah calls them to do something, they do it. When there's a commandment that Allah gives, they fulfill that commandment and that amr. But then there are other people whose will is not separate from Allah's will. It's not just that Allah tells me to do something and then I do it. And then I have to fight with my soul, with my nafs. And then once I have fought with my soul, then I decide to do that which Allah wants me to do. I don't want to wake up to do my salat in the morning. In the month of Ramadan, in the beginning it's very hard for me to refrain from doing the things that are going to break my fast. But then ultimately, because I believe in Allah, because I have faith in Iman, I bring myself to do it. I wake up, I fast, I go through all of the difficulties that Allah has placed for me in this month. There are others, however, and these are some of the most beautiful stories of the Quran. This beautiful episode in Surah Al-Kahf, where Allah describes the relationship and this sort of instruction that Nabi Khidr alayhi salam gives to Nabi Musa alayhi salam. One prophet in relation to another. The end of that story is very beautiful. The whole story is beautiful, of course, but the end is particularly important for the point here. Allah says, after Nabi Musa has asked his questions, you're all familiar with the story, inshallah, where Nabi Musa asks Nabi Khidr, can I come along with you on your journey, these actions and these tasks that Allah has set for you? In the first place, before they begin, Nabi Khidr says, you cannot last, because I have to do certain things that maybe are going to be questionable in your mind. And he begins and does certain things that maybe even we are wondering about. He bores a hole in a ship that is going towards a particular kingdom, and then he destroys a wall, and then he builds that wall, and then, for example, he goes and slaughters a child. These are very strange things that we might not be able to properly comprehend. And Nabi Musa himself also has questions. By the end of it, after he has asked, Nabi Musa has asked his third question, right? The third question that Nabi Musa is famously asked or asks in this story. Nabi Khidr says, هَذَا فِرَاقُ بَيْنِي وَبَيْنِكَ. This is where we have to separate. This is where you go your way and I will go my way. سَأُنَبِّئُكَ بِتَأْوِيلِ مَا لَمْ تَسْتَطِعْ عَلَيْهِ صَبْرًا. But before you go your separate way, I am going to tell you the secret of why I did what I did, and that which you could not bear. أما السفينة فكانت لمساكين يعملون في البحر فأردت أن أعيبها وكان وراءهم ملك يأخذ كل سفينة غصبا. As for that ship that I bore the hole in, that was for a certain group of people who were poor, people who could not provide for themselves. And they were fishermen, they worked in the sea. فَأَرَدْتُ, I wanted to create this defect in these ships. I wanted to create this defect in these ships so that the king who was going to confiscate these ships, he would not take their property. He would not steal their property from them. وَأَمَّا الْغُلَامُ وَأَمَّا الْغُلَامُ صلوا على محمد وعلى محمد. فَكَانَ أَبَوَاهُ مُؤْمِنَيْنِ فَخَشِينَا أَنْ يُرْهِقَهُمَا طُغْيَانًا وَكُفْرًا. As for that child that was slaughtered, that child that was killed, we were afraid that their parents who were believers, that this child was going to grow up and his kufr and his disbelief was going to bring some trouble to them, was going to hinder them. And then فَأَرَدْنَا أَنْ يُبْدِلَهُمَا رَبُّهُمَا خَيْرًا مِنْهُ. And then we wanted for Allah to replace that child with another child that was going to be good. Zakatan wa aqraba ruhma. A child who was going to be purified and was going to be closer to them. وَأَمَّا الْجِدَارُ فَكَانَ لِغُلَامَيْنِ يَتِيمَيْنِ فِي الْمَدِينَةِ وَكَانَ تَحْتَهُ كَنْزٌ لَهُمَا وَكَانَ أَبُوهُمَا صَالِحًا فَأَرَادَ رَبُّكَ. As for that wall that I went and constructed and I repaired, this was for a set of orphans that they had this inheritance that was buried under this wall. And if this wall was left in its state, then this inheritance was going to be uncovered and discovered. And it was going to be taken away from them. And so what we did was, we went and constructed it so that they would reach their inheritance when they grew up. فَأَرَادَ رَبُّكَ. And your Lord wanted to. The first, Nabi Khidr says, I wanted to. The second, he says, we wanted to. That means me and my Lord. And then in the third, he says that your Rabb, your Lord wanted to. The Mufassirun have debated, why is it that there is this change in pronouns? Why is it that first he refers to himself, second he refers in this plural, and then third he refers to Allah? Some of them say that it's because there are moments, there are things, actions that Nabi Khidr can associate with himself, like the boring of a hole. This is not something that is questionable or that is controversial. And so Nabi Khidr, out of his respect for Allah, he attributes this to himself. And then there are others which he does not, out of respect, attribute to himself. He attributes it to Allah, because these are not things that he can make the decision on his own. Others have given other interpretations. The idea, though, here is that there are people who have been able to align their want with Allah's want, that there is now this gray area. Is this what he wants, or is this what Allah wants? Is there a difference between what Nabi Khidr wants and what Allah wants, or is there sometimes he can attribute it to Allah, sometimes he can attribute it to himself? There's no two. There is one irada. There is one desire. There is one want and will that Nabi Khidr is displaying in these verses. Sallu ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad. Let us move again to the story of Surat Al-Insan. When this is a famous story that is told about the Ahlul Bayt, Imam Ali, Lady Fatima, and Hasanain. When the beggar, the wayfarer, and the prisoner come and knock on the door of the Ahlul Bayt. And when they go and give the food that they had saved for themselves to that beggar, the way that they describe this relationship and the action that they did is not just in terms of what they want, but as well in terms of what Allah wants from them. Thinking about, do they have a separate will from Allah, or is their will one and in unison with Allah? They say, يُوفُونَ بِالنَّظْرِ وَيَخَافُونَ يَوْمًا كَانَ شَرُّهُ مُسْتَطِيرًا. They fulfill their nadhr, that oath that they made with Allah, and they fear a day in which its evil is all-encompassing. وَيُطْعِمُونَ الطَّعَامَ عَلَى حُبِّهِ مِسْكِينًا وَيَتِيمًا وَأَسِيرًا. And they give food to the miskin, the poor, the orphan, and the asir, the prisoner, not because this is something that they want a reward for, but because this is what Allah wants. Ala hubbihi. This is out of a love for Allah. Innama nut'imukum. And when they are asked, why did you give this food? Innama nut'imukum liwajhillah. La nuridu minkum jaza'an wala shukura. We don't want any reward from you. Nor are they expecting a reward from their Lord, even though they know their Lord is merciful and compassionate. They don't do this out of a reward that they are expecting, but rather out of love. And this is the crucial point when we look in the verses of the Quran, what distinguishes the Ahlul Bayt from all other creatures, from even the angels of Allah, that they fulfill their action and their responsibility to Allah because of a love. Sallu ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad. There is this very famous poem from Iqbal, and it's in Urdu, of course. Somewhat embarrassing for me because I don't speak Urdu that well. But if you all will assist me, I will try to recite it and then we'll translate it, inshallah. Sallu ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad. And this points us to the fact that when we are thinking about what goal or what end we are trying to reach, it's not just that we align our wants with Allah, but rather that I get to a point where it's out of utter love. And then we think about, well, how is it that Allah will respond to us? Iqbal says, Khudi ko kar buland itna ke har taqdeer se pehle. Elevate yourself to such an extent that before every turn of fate, Khuda bande se khud Puche bata teri Reza kya hai. That God asks you as His servant, tell me what you want. Elevate your status. Elevate your want and your irada, your desire, what it means for you to be human to such an extent that when Allah destines for you something, He doesn't say, well, this is what I want you to do. But rather Allah says, what will make you content? That is what I will destine for you. What is it that you want? And then Allah chooses. In other words, Allah's choice becomes aligned with my choice. And this is one of the characteristics of the Ahlul Bayt. It is asked of the Ahlul Bayt, what does it mean when we think about Allah's attributes? What does it mean that Allah gets angry? Or Allah gets happy. Allah becomes content. That we have Reza Allah. That we have anger or ghadabullah. What does that even mean? Allah is not a human being who has emotions, who is a passive being in this world. He is the ultimate actor. He is the ultimate being. Not someone who faces something and then he becomes angry, and then faces something and then he becomes happy or content. The Ahlul Bayt say that if you want to understand Allah, what it means for Allah to have emotions, then Allah has created beings whose wants and whose desires are fully in line with His want and His desire. That we understand what it means for Allah to have wants. We say Allah's want. That is as well aligned with the wants and the desires of His special beings. The Imam Ja'far as-Sadiq alayhi salam, he says, إن الله عز وجل لا يأسف كأسفنا ولكنه خلق أولياء لنفسه. That Allah, He does not become angry and upset like we become angry and upset. Rather, He has created awliya, certain individuals, who, when they become angry, يَأْسِفُونَ وَيَرَضَوْنَ وَهُمْ مَخْلُوقُونَ مَرْبُوبُونَ فَجَعَلَ رِضَاهُمْ رِضَى نَفْسِهِ. That Allah, He, when they become angry and when they become content, despite the fact that they are His creation and they are people who He has nurtured and instructed, when they become angry, that is a reflection of Allah's anger. When they become content, that is a reflection of Allah's contentment. لأنه جعلهم الدعاة إليه والأدلاء عليه. He has made them the means by which we reach Allah and the signs which point to Allah. What does it mean? In other words, the Imam says in Surah An-Nisa, ayah number 80, when Allah says, "Man yuti'ar rasula faqad ata Allah." When you obey the Prophet, you have obeyed Allah, because it is the want and the desire of the Prophet that is the desire of Allah. إِنَّ الَّذِي يُبَايِعُونَكَ or إِنَّ الَّذِينَ يُبَايِعُونَكَ إِنَّمَا يُبَايِعُونَ اللَّهِ يَدَ اللَّهِ فَوْقَ أَيْدِيهِمْ or يَدُ اللَّهِ فَوْقَ أَيْدِيهِمْ. Those who come and give bay'ah to you, O Prophet, they are giving bay'ah to Allah. The hand of Allah is over their hand. In other words, the Prophet becomes the fullest representation, not only of what Allah's commandments are, but he is the one on one level who determines Allah's commandment. If he wants something, then that is what Allah wants as well. If he hates something, then that is what Allah hates as well. And this is when we come to the desires and the wants and the person of Amirul Mu'mineen. We see this in the most beautiful of ways. That Amirul Mu'mineen, throughout his life, he tried to, and he was successful in aligning his soul, what it means to be human, and his will and his volition, he aligned it with the volition of the Prophet of Allah, and through the Prophet of Allah himself. It is said that when Amirul Mu'mineen Imam Ali was struck, that final and fatal blow, think about what we would have done and how Imam Ali responds. What our leaders would have done and how Imam Ali responds. This day, sometimes the people who, na'udhu billah, we have to look up to, or that are in charge of our countries, they say that don't just kill the person, na'udhu billah, who has brought us some grief, but as well go and attack his family. Go and attack innocent people who surround him. And don't just destroy him, but destroy him in the most vile of ways. Imam Ali, he responds in this way. When he is struck that fatal blow, instead of saying, now is the time, once you have captured my assassin, go and do with him what you will. Instead, the Imam responds, tells Imam Hassan, if I am still living, then I will go and deal with him as I see fit. But if I pass away from this blow, then you have only the right to strike him as he has struck me. One blow for one blow, one strike for one strike. It is said that Imam Ali, he tells Imam Hassan, Iyyakum wal mathula. I warn you against torturing this person. Yes, you might love me, but do not torture the person who has assassinated me. Iyyakum wal mathula. This is what I have heard from Rasulullah himself. The Prophet said, do not torture the people who are under your hand and who are in your grasp. Walau bil kalbil aqur. not just human beings, but even animals, voracious, and those animals that are going and, for example, attacking you. Think about a dog that attacks another animal. Or even, na'udhu billah, a child. What do you want to do with that dog? You want to tear it to pieces. The Imam, he says that I heard the Prophet say, even such a dog, do not torture that dog. You might have to put it down, but be kind and merciful to it. And this is how Amirul Mu'mineen responded to his enemies. Think about how he responded to those of his companions. It is said that in those final moments of the life of Amirul Mu'mineen, he looks to his family and he begins to give one will and testament to each one of his children. And he tells them, "Oh, my children, one of the things that really hurts us is that Amirul Mu'mineen, with all of his virtue, with all of his compassion and his mercy towards the people of Kufa, rather towards the Muslim Ummah. He guided them at times when he was exiled. He was the one who stood up in battles to protect the Prophet of Allah. And yet when the time comes that Amirul Mu'mineen, Imam Ali, is saying farewell to the Ummah, he has to give this will and testament to his children, that, oh, my children, go and dig up different graves for me. It is said that Amirul Mu'mineen told Imam Hassan, dig for me 4 separate graves and conceal my grave in the eyes of all of this ummah. Because I know that if this ummah knew, if people like Muawiyah knew where I was buried, if the Khawarij knew where I was buried, they would dig up my body and they would desecrate my body. And so it is said that Amirul Mu'mineen, he tells them, dig 4 graves for me and bury me in the cover of night. It is said that Amirul Mu'mineen's grave was not discovered except for many decades had passed until the time of Harun al-Rashid. The Ahlul Bayt would come in secrecy to pay their respects and their ziyarat to Amirul Mu'mineen. This famous ziyarat that we do on a night like this, ziyarat Amin Allah, is a ziyarat that was passed down through the Ahlul Bayt in secrecy and in the protection of the night. Think about the oppression that Amirul Mu'mineen would have to face. Think about the innocence of Imam Ali. And think about his compassion towards those who were oppressed and towards those who were innocent. It is said that Amirul Mu'mineen's body was given the ghusl in his own house, again in the cover of the night, by Imam Hassan and Imam Hussein and Muhammad ibn Hanafiya and some of his most closest of companions. No one was there to bid farewell to Amirul Mu'mineen except for his own household. And when Amirul Mu'mineen's body is placed within the grave, it is said that the Anbiya are now giving their respects. It was placed in a grave that was dug by Nabi Adam and Nabi Nuh. A tablet was placed within that grave that said this is the burial place of Nabi Adam and Nabi Nuh, and now it is the burial place of Amirul Mu'mineen. And then, according to one story, when Imam Hassan and Imam Hussein are coming back towards their home, grieving the loss of their father, it is said that they come across a ruins, a house that was falling apart, and they hear the cries of an old man. Think about the innocence of Amirul Mu'mineen, but also his compassion. It is said that when Imam Hassan hears the cries of this man, they enter into the house and they ask the man, this old blind man, "Why are you crying, old man? Can we help you? Can we assist you with anything? It is said that the man, he responds that there was a man who would come and he would watch over me and he would give me whatever I needed. And yet, it's been 3 days that I do not see this man. He has not come to visit me. And I am wondering, was it something that I did that made this man go away from me? Imam Hassan and Imam Hussein, they asked this man, oh, will you tell us some sign? Tell us who this man was. Tell us his name. The man said, I do not know his name. Give us some sign of who this man was. He says, he never told me his name and I am blind. I could not tell who he was. But I know one thing, that he was so kind that he would pay me a visit every night. And he was so generous that he would feed me from his own hand. And he would murmur under his breath, Miskinun jalasa miskinan. Gharibun jalasa ghariban. I am a man who is poor and I am sitting next to and I am accompanying a man who is also poor. I am a stranger and I am accompanying a man who is a stranger. This is what he would say. And Imam Hassan and Imam Hussein, they realized that this man was none other than Amirul Mu'mineen. They tell this man, this person who would come and visit you, this was our father, this was Amirul Mu'mineen, this was the Khalifa of the time. And you are in the city, the capital of Amirul Mu'mineen. And this man, he gives out a heart-wrenching wail. And he says, this was Amirul Mu'mineen who would come and sit next to a person like me. And he would serve me what I wanted. And it is said that he asks Imam Hassan and Imam Hussein, I have just one desire. Will you take me next to the grave of Amir al-Mu'mineen? And Imam Hassan and Imam Hussein lift this man and they place him by the grave and he begins to cry and he begins to wail. And we say, Ya Amir al-Mu'mineen, your tragedy is severe. You were a stranger in your own city. But then we have to only compare the tragedy of Amir al-Mu'mineen to the tragedy of Aba Abdullah. It is said that in that final night of the life of Amir al-Mu'mineen, one of the wills and one of the testaments that Imam Ali gave was to his son Hussein. It is said that he gives an instruction to each one of his sons, but when it comes to Hussein, he says, Ya bunay, qad rabata Allahu qalbaka bis-sabr. Oh my Hussein, you might find this moment to be difficult, but oh my Hussein, you have to strengthen your heart, and Allah has strengthened your heart with patience, because you are going to see things that no other member of the Ahlul Bayt is going to see. You are going to have to bear things that no other member is going to bear. Oh my Hussein, I am leaving this world with my entire family surrounding me. Yes, I am a stranger in my own city, but at least I have all of you. But oh Hussein, you are going to be killed on the plains of Karbala. You are going to hold your nephew in your arms as the arrows are going to strike you and your nephew. And oh Hussein, you are going to hold your infant son in your arms. And he is going to give his life, this infant, in your arms. But oh Hussein, have patience. Oh Hussein, the enemy soldiers, these very people of Kufa, are going to come and attack you. And they're going to desecrate your body, O Hussein, but you will have to have patience. And one of them, na'udhu billah, is going to slaughter you as he slaughters a sheep. But O Hussein, have patience in the face of Allah's want and Allah's will. وَسَيَعْلَمُ الَّذِينَ ظَلَمُوا أَيَّ مُنْقَلِبٍ يَنْقَلِبُونَ.
وآل محمد. Brothers and sisters, that concludes our program downstairs. If you could please make your way upstairs to join the Urdu program. Thank you.